side bend, side tilt, lateral flexion. And that side tilt is always in axial rotation in the opposite direction of the turn. In other words, you tilt to the left, you extend and tilt to the left to induce axial rotation to the right. It's called the coupling of the spine. It's basic mechanics. Okay? So you extend out of the forward bend, and it's not easy for some people to see because at the same time they're extending out of the spine on the backswing, they're replacing that extension by a side bend. So he's gradually transferring into a side bend as he moves through the time and space of the backswing. Such that by the time he reaches the top of the backswing, he's completely extended out of the forward bend and replaced it with lateral flexion as he turns. That's a three-dimensional movement of the spine. That's not up for debate that happens. Flexion extension is one of the basic movements of locomotion in all species. Flexion extension of our legs, okay? The lateral flexion, tilting in the frontal plane. Basic movement of locomotion in all species, okay? The fish moves, the primitive fish moves itself by lateral flexion, the snake. That's how they move. That's how they propel themselves. It's lateral flexion. The whale in the water, the primitive whale, right? One of the oldest species, propels itself through the water, flexion extension. The human being propels itself. How it propels itself, the human being can do both. It can couple those. It can flex and extend, and it can laterally flex. And the ability to extend and laterally flex gives us the ability to turn. They don't have, fish can't do that. Whale can't do that. Okay? We have the ability to extend and tilt to help us induce rotation. Define this as a species, frankly. It's part of the ability for us to walk upright, to turn. However, in golf, flexion extension and lateral flexion, the primary movements in the movement of species, have been systematically discouraged. Don't straighten your leg. Don't tilt to the left. Don't extend. You're putting someone in a freaking chair or in a cast, and you're basically immobilizing them and telling them they can't move. And then what happens, okay? Rob comes up here and he says, okay, now Rob, you're going to swing and you're going to keep your leg flexed. You're going to try to shift back, and you're not going to tilt to the left and do that stacky tilt, okay? And you're going to stay in your spine angle. And so he swings back, and his arm will only go parallel to the ground. The butt of the club here is only moved. The butt of the club starts here. The butt of the start again, please. The butt of the club's right here. Okay, swing back. The butt of the club's only moved 6 and 8 inches. Okay, it's only elevated 8 inches. He can't get the freaking club back. He can't move. Then to try to get it back farther, he lifts his arms or bends them, fluctuates his radius, comes off the arc, going to swing across the ball, get hit behind it, or okay, all hell breaks loose. Because all the basic movements of locomotion have been systematically discouraged. Then what happens is that, hey, you know what? Jeez, that swings, you've got 80 degrees of shoulder, 60 degrees of shoulder turn. Your swing's too short. You can't swing fast enough. You can't hit the ball far enough. I'm going to do a screen on you. And I'm going to test your, that freaking scapula, that's too tight. I'm failed. I'm going to take your internal hip mobility, too freaking tight, you can't turn a bit. Horse shit, okay? Sorry. That's too tight. Fail. Let me test your hamstrings. Oh, jeez. Those are the tightest hamstrings I've ever seen. Fail. Then he's taken on a fitness screen that's designed for people to fail. No one ever passes the fitness screen. No one ever passes. So then he's told, well, Rob, you can't perform the basic movements of locomotion, okay? And you can't perform the basic movements of locomotion because your hamstrings are too tight and your glutes are too tight. You need a 3-hour soft tissue massage and a 3-hour workout program before you can function as a golfer. Nonsense, right? It's the most damaging thing that's happened to the golf instruction world in my lifetime. It discourages people from wanting to practice. It's expensive. It takes time away from chipping and putting. A lot of times it sends them away from the country club into some strip mall, okay, wanting to, under the pretext that even if they were flexible enough, that they would apply it to their golf swing. The swing's a motor program. Just because you have the capacity to do it doesn't mean you'll choose that. Your brain may not make the choice to use those in your swing anyway. How can it be? How can it possibly be that it can get that far off? Well, the industry is rooted in a resistance-based model of loading the glute, Frankenstein, push back, a bipedal model of locomotion, pushing back, pushing forward, okay, loading into the glute, shift back, shift through. Don't straighten your leg. Don't extend. Don't tilt. That's a reverse pivot. So then we have to develop, instead of, hey, why isn't this working? We develop a scenario where we say, well, people can't do it. Think about that for a second. People can't do it. That should be enough. People can't do it. Or you can't do it for a reason, right? So, anyway, what I'm saying is that on the back, or what I'm saying here is how when Rob swings back, that he's supposed to extend, he's supposed to tilt to the opposite side of the turn, the coupling of those movements, the flexion and extension, okay? The extending, the lateral flexion, okay? Right? Help induce the movement for us to turn. I'm hoping to impart upon you the courage to tell some people in your lessons, don't be afraid. Tell them to straighten their leg, tell them to tilt, tell them to extend. That's what they need. Those are the basic movements, okay? And that comes from being sure. Okay, that's why sometimes I'm animated. I don't mean to be pushy about it, but it's important because you've got to be able to teach. This is basic stuff, and you've got to be able to teach these basic movements fast. You don't have all day to teach someone to straighten their leg. It should take you 5 minutes, and there shouldn't be any argument about it. So, bend the left, straighten the right, turn the hips. Extend and tilt. Now the question is how much to extend and tilt? I think we're all clear that that everyone extends and everyone tilts. So now it's only a question of how much. So what guides the golfer to know how much to extend and how much to tilt? How would a person ever know to do that? The right amount. The answer is that in our world, the amount to extend and the amount to tilt is governed by the desire to create axial rotation about the spine, progressively up, all the way up the vertebral column. In other words, if I have the desire to move my hands in an arc about my spine and to make my spine as an axis that is stable in both planes, in other words, I have a centered shoulder turn that doesn't translate, and I have no vertebral glide backwards in the frontal plane, and down the line, the sagittal plane, I have the desire to keep the same inclination to the ground. If I have both of those desires to make that kind of a movement, that requires my body to respond in a very specific way. And that is of extending and tilting the proper amount to couple my spine to induce axial rotation. So if I had the desire to do a stable centered shoulder turn on a consistently stable inclination to the ground, that tells me how much to extend and tilt. That's a theory. How much to extend and tilt is a theory. We subscribe to a stable inclination, a centered shoulder turn, trying to trace an arc, okay? So that is the hypothesis of stack and tilt would be, if you want to write this down too, the hypothesis of stack and tilt would be how much of the basic movements of extending and tilting and turning that the golfer would apply.